The faces in the boardroom turned toward me, with that familiar mix of polite interest and quiet expectation. I stood at the front, steadying my breath. My presentation glowing behind me, 3 years of relentless work distilled into this moment. This was supposed to secure everything: my place in the company, the funding, my future. But I never imagined that all my hard work could be erased with just one sentence. Are you curious? Hit the like button. Because this story is only just beginning. I'd also love to know where you're listening from and how old you are. Now, let's go back to that boardroom. I had just begun explaining the core breakthrough when the door opened. I'm sorry to interrupt. Sarah, the voice said. It wasn't sorry. I turned slowly. Clara Whitmore, the CEO's daughter, stepped in wearing confidence like armor, without waiting for permission. She moved toward the screen. There's been a change of plans. My grip tightened around the remote as she reached the console. With one effortless motion, my slides disappeared. Replaced. My stomach dropped. Her presentation filled the screen, polished, refined, and unmistakably built on my research. The investors straightened, instantly shifting their attention to her. We've developed a more promising direction, she said smoothly. Then, as she passed me, her voice lowered just enough. We don't need your ideas anymore. I stood there, frozen, as my work, my future was taken from me in real time. I want to make one thing clear. This story is fictional, but it's inspired by real situations that happen in workplaces every day. Some details have been enhanced with the help of artificial intelligence to make the story more vivid, more emotional, and to highlight the deeper lessons behind it. Now, let's continue. Clara didn't hesitate for even a second. She moved through the slides with a confidence that would have been impressive if I hadn't recognized every detail she was presenting: the structure of the model, the sequence of stabilization phases, even the phrasing of key insights I had written in my private notes during late nights in the lab. She delivered them flawlessly, as if they had always belonged to her. I felt my pulse in my ears as each slide confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't inspiration. This was theft. And with this approach, Clara continued, gesturing toward a projection I had refined just weeks ago, we can significantly increase efficiency while reducing degradation risks. The investors leaned in, their earlier curiosity turning into excitement. One of them, a man named Daniel Reeves, nodded slowly, clearly impressed. This is exactly the kind of innovation we're looking for, he said. A quiet ripple of agreement moved around the table. No one questioned where the ideas had come from. No one asked why the person who had been presenting just moments ago was now standing silent to the side. I tried to speak once, opening my mouth to interrupt, to correct the narrative, but the moment slipped past me. Clara's voice filled every gap, controlled every second. Sarah's early work helped lay the foundation, she added casually, finally acknowledging me without looking in my direction. But this new direction is where the real value lies. Foundation. That was all I had been reduced to. 3 years of work, summarized into a footnote. I stood there, hands at my sides. As the room responded with approval, applause followed. Polite at first, then stronger, and just like that, I was no longer the person who built the future. I was the one who had been erased from it. I'm not the kind of person people expect to see leading a breakthrough in molecular systems. I didn't come from a prestigious university or a family with connections in biotech. I grew up in a cramped apartment above a laundromat, where the hum of machines never really stopped. My mother worked double shifts cleaning offices that looked nothing like the world I would eventually step into. I studied wherever I could: kitchen tables, stairwells, even the back room of that laundromat when it was quiet enough to think. Nothing was handed to me. Every opportunity came with a cost. I worked my way through school on scholarships and part-time jobs, often sleeping just a few hours a night, while others networked or relaxed. I stayed in the lab, assisting on projects that never carried my name. I learned to observe, to connect patterns others overlooked, and to keep going when recognition never came. When I joined Whitmore Biotech 4 years ago, it felt like the first real break of my life. Richard Whitmore, the CEO, had told me during the interview that fresh perspectives mattered. I believed him, for the first time. I thought I had found a place where my work could speak for itself. For 3 years, I gave everything to that belief. 16-hour days became routine. I pushed through failed experiments, recalibrated models, and rebuilt processes from scratch. Slowly, piece by piece, I developed a stabilization method that could change how targeted treatments were delivered, making them more precise, more effective, and far less harmful. It wasn't just a project to me. It was proof that everything I had endured meant something. And now, standing in that boardroom, I realized just how easily all of it could be taken away. Clara Whitmore hadn't always been part of my world. She appeared 8 months ago, introduced in a company-wide meeting with polished confidence and a title that sounded important, but vague enough to mean anything. Director of Strategic Innovation. No one really knew what that involved, but no one questioned it either. Richard Whitmore stood beside her that day, pride unmistakable in his voice as he spoke about fresh vision and bold direction. I remember clapping along with everyone else, telling myself this could be a good thing. New leadership often meant new opportunities. At first, Clara seemed genuinely interested in the work happening in the lab. She visited often, leaning casually against my workstation, asking thoughtful questions about my research. She wanted to understand the stabilization process, the variables, the limitations. I explained everything carefully, even enthusiastically. It felt good to finally have someone in leadership paying attention. "You're incredibly talented, Sarah," she told me once, watching a simulation run across my screen. "But sometimes brilliance needs the right framing to succeed." I didn't think much of that comment at the time. I took it as a compliment, maybe even encouragement, looking back. It was neither. Over time, her questions became more specific. She asked to see my latest lab notebooks, wanted access to raw data, requested detailed breakdowns of projections I hadn't even finalized. I hesitated once, briefly, but she smiled and reminded me we were on the same team. So I shared. I let her into the parts of my work that mattered most, believing transparency would lead to collaboration. What I didn't realize was that she wasn't trying to understand the process. She was mapping it. Every conversation, every note, every late-night explanation was another piece she needed to build something that looked like hers. And by the time I started to feel uneasy, it was already too late. By the time I walked out of that building, the applause was still echoing in my ears. I don't remember saying goodbye to anyone. I don't remember the elevator ride down. All I remember was the moment I reached my car and finally let my hands drop onto the steering wheel. They were shaking. 3 years of work, gone in less than 10 minutes. Not destroyed, not debated, not even questioned, just replaced. I sat there for a long time, staring through the windshield without really seeing anything. My mind kept replaying the same moment over and over again. The click of the remote, my slides disappearing, Clara's voice filling the room. "We don't need your ideas anymore." That sentence didn't just end my presentation. It ended my place in that company. But as the shock began to settle, something else started to take its place. Clarity. Because the truth was, Clara could present my work, but she didn't understand it. Not really. She had memorized the outcome, not the process. She knew what it looked like when it worked, but not how to make it work. And that difference was everything. I reached for my phone, then stopped. No calls, no messages, not yet. They hadn't realized, not fully, which meant I still had time. I drove home on autopilot, my thoughts shifting from disbelief to calculation. Every file, every version, every iteration of my research, I knew exactly where the critical pieces were and what separated a working system from a failed one. I wasn't going to destroy anything. I didn't need to. All I had to do was step away. And when they tried to move forward without me, they would finally understand what they had lost. I glanced at the clock on my dashboard. 48 hours. That's how long it would take before everything started to fall apart. The next morning arrived with a strange, almost artificial calm. Like the silence before a storm you know is coming but can't yet see. I dressed carefully, more out of habit than necessity, and drove back to Whitmore Biotech, not because I belonged there anymore, but because I knew exactly what would be happening inside those walls. The moment I stepped into the building, I felt it. Something was wrong. Conversations were hushed, scattered. People moved quickly, avoiding eye contact. The usual rhythm of the lab had been replaced by tension so thick it was almost visible. Screens flickered with data that didn't make sense. Equipment was being reset, recalibrated, restarted, over and over again. But nothing worked. I walked past my station without stopping, listening as fragments of panic reached me. The stabilization phase keeps collapsing. It worked yesterday. I don't understand. Did someone change the variables? They hadn't changed anything. That was the problem. They were following outputs without understanding the logic behind them. Clara had shown them a destination, but she had never learned the path. And now they were lost inside a system they couldn't control. Sarah. The voice cut through the noise like a crack of thunder. I turned slowly. Richard Whitmore stood at the far end of the lab, his face tight with barely contained anger. The calm, composed CEO from yesterday was gone. In his place was a man on the edge of something much worse than frustration. Office. Now. Every conversation died instantly as I followed him. I could feel the weight of every pair of eyes on my back, waiting for answers I hadn't given. Inside his office. The door slammed shut behind me. "Where is it?" he demanded. Skipping any pretense of control, I met his gaze evenly. "Where is what don't play games with me?" He snapped. "The core stabilization process is incomplete. The system won't run. The investors are coming back in less than an hour for a live demonstration, and nothing works." I let the silence stretch just long enough for the truth to sink in. "You said yesterday," I replied calmly, "that you didn't need my ideas anymore." His expression hardened. "That presentation," he said, his voice lower now, more dangerous, "was built on your work, and now that work is failing. So I'll ask you again. What did you do if you're satisfied with how things are unfolding? Go ahead and hit the like button. I truly appreciate your support." I didn't answer him immediately. I let the weight of his question hang in the air, watching the shift in his expression as certainty slowly gave way to something else. Uncertainty. "I didn't do anything," I said finally. "At least, not in the way you're implying." His eyes narrowed. "That's not possible. We had working results, consistent results. You had outcomes." I corrected calmly. "That's not the same as understanding." Before he could respond, the office door burst open. Clara stepped in, her composure from yesterday completely gone. "Dad, the team can't get it to stabilize. They've tried everything." She stopped when she saw me, her voice tightening. "What is she doing here?" "I came to collect my things," I said, adjusting my bag slightly. "Since you made it clear yesterday that my ideas weren't needed." Her face paled. "You did something. You must have." "This isn't working. That's unfortunate," I replied evenly. "Have you tried your alternative approach, the one with better commercial potential?" The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut through. Richard stepped forward, lowering his voice. "Sarah, listen to me. We can fix this. Whatever misunderstanding happened yesterday, we can correct it. You'll get full credit. A promotion. Name your terms." For a moment, I just looked at him. This was the same man who had watched me be erased without saying a word. "You're offering me what should have already been mine," I said quietly. "And only because you need something from me." His jaw tightened. "This is bigger than personal feelings. The company is on the line." "No," I replied. What's on the line is control. Clara's voice cut in. Sharper now. Stop playing games and fix it. I met her gaze, steady and unshaken. You're asking me to fix something you claim to have created. Richard exhaled slowly, the last of his patience slipping. You're not leaving until this is resolved. I tilted my head slightly. Are you trying to prevent me from walking out? The implication landed exactly where it needed to, after a brief pause. He stepped aside. This isn't over, he said. It already is, I replied, moving past him. I resigned yesterday. You just didn't notice. And with that, I walked out this time on my own terms. I didn't go far. Instead of driving home, I parked across the street from the building, where I had a clear view of the main entrance. I sat there in silence, watching the glass doors. Waiting. It didn't take long. Within minutes, black cars began to pull up one after another. The investors arrived with the same confidence they had carried the day before. Unaware that everything inside had already begun to unravel, I checked the time, right on schedule. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it ring once, twice. Then answered. Sarah Brooks speaking. Daniel Reeves, the voice said. Tight and controlled. We need to talk. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Where are you? I glanced back at the building. Close. There was a brief pause. There's a cafe across the street. 5 minutes. The line went dead. When I walked in, Daniel was already seated in the far corner, his usual composure slightly cracked. His tie was loosened, his eyes sharper than before. What happened in there? He asked the moment I sat down. I took my time, setting my bag down, meeting his gaze calmly. That depends. What did you see? I saw a system that worked yesterday, completely fail today, he replied, and I saw a company that can't explain why. I nodded slowly. That's a problem when you're about to invest millions. His eyes narrowed. You're behind this. That's an assumption. Then correct me. I leaned forward slightly. Yesterday. Who did Clara say developed that process? He hesitated. She presented it as the company's innovation. Exactly. I said, the company's, not mine. Silence settled between us as the implication took shape. You're saying, he began. I'm saying, I cut in gently. You should be very careful where you place your trust and your money. He studied me closely now, no longer dismissing me as background noise. What do you want? Sarah, finally, a real question. I want to show you what actually works. I said, not a presentation, not a projection, the real process. And in return, I held his gaze. We talk about investing in the right person. By the end of that day, everything inside Whitmore Biotech began to collapse faster than even I had expected. The demonstration failed. Completely, from what I later heard. The investors sat through 20 minutes of confusion as the lab team tried to stabilize a process they didn't understand. Systems froze. Data contradicted itself. Explanations fell apart mid-sentence. Clara tried to recover, shifting blame to equipment issues, then to unexpected variables. But confidence, once broken, doesn't come back with excuses. Daniel and the others didn't stay long after that. They walked out. And this time, they didn't come back. By evening, the first wave of consequences hit. Internal messages started circulating. Emergency meetings were called. Departments that had been celebrating just hours earlier were suddenly scrambling to explain losses that hadn't even fully materialized yet. People talk in moments like that, quietly at first, then louder. Questions turned into doubts. Doubts turned into decisions. Senior researchers began updating their resumes. A few didn't even wait. They walked out before the day ended. Others followed the next morning, unwilling to tie their future to a company that had just exposed its own foundation as unstable. Clara disappeared from sight. Rumors spread that the board had removed her from her position quietly, trying to contain the damage before it became public. The The same confidence she had carried into that boardroom vanished overnight. As for Richard Whitmore, the man who once controlled every room he entered, he was now fighting to hold on to what little authority he had left. Investors pulling out, staff leaving, reputation crumbling. And the worst part for him wasn't the financial loss. It was the realization that the one person who could have prevented all of it had already walked away. 2 days later, I stood in a conference room that felt nothing like the one I had been pushed out of. No tension, no arrogance, no one trying to take something that wasn't theirs, just 6 investors and me. I set up my laptop slowly, letting the silence settle before I began. This time, there was no interruption waiting behind a closed door, no one hovering, ready to replace me. This, I said calmly, bringing up the first slide, is the actual stabilization process, not a summary, not a polished version, the real thing. I walked them through every step, not just the outcome, but the reasoning behind it, the failures that led to breakthroughs, the adjustments no one would notice unless they had spent years inside the work itself. Then I demonstrated it. Live. The system ran smoothly, exactly as it had in my own controlled environment. The data aligned. The results held. No confusion, no collapse. When I finished, the room stayed quiet for a moment, not out of doubt, but because they understood what they had just seen, something real. Daniel was the first to speak. This changes everything. I didn't respond immediately. I let that statement sit. Because it was true in more ways than one. "What are you proposing?" another investor asked. I met their eyes, steady and certain. "I've already started my own company." I said, "Independent, focused, built around this technology." There were glances exchanged, quick calculations happening in real time. "And the intellectual property?" Daniel asked. "It's mine," I answered. "Developed independently. Documented. Protected." That was all they needed. The conversation shifted, from doubt to opportunity. By the end of the meeting, the numbers were no longer theoretical. Initial funding, structured growth, long-term expansion, not promises, commitments. Weeks later, standing in my own lab, smaller, quieter, but entirely mine, I watched as my team prepared the next phase of development. People who understood the work, people who respected it. No shortcuts, no stolen credit, just progress. My phone buzzed with a final update. Richard Whitmore had been removed as CEO. I read the message once, then set the phone aside. There was no satisfaction in his downfall, because this had never been about destroying him. It was about building something he could never take from me. And in the end, that was the only outcome that truly mattered. I used to believe that hard work alone would protect me, that if I gave everything, stayed honest, and delivered results, I would be recognized. This experience changed that belief forever. Looking back, I didn't just lose something in that boardroom, I gained clarity. The first lesson I learned is this: your value is not defined by how others treat you. If someone dismisses you, it doesn't erase what you've built. Second, never confuse access with trust. Not everyone who shows interest in your work has good intentions. Third, understanding is power. People can copy results, but they can't replicate depth. Fourth, always protect what you create, legally and strategically, because talent alone is not enough in the real world. And finally, the most important lesson, sometimes walking away is not a loss. It's the beginning of everything. I didn't win by fighting louder or proving them wrong in that moment. I won by knowing my worth and building something they couldn't control. Now I'm curious about you. What lesson did this story leave with you? Maybe it reminded you of something you've experienced, or maybe it gave you a new perspective. Share it in the comments. I read every single one, and your voice matters more than you think. If this story meant something to you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. This community isn't just about stories, it's about people who choose to rise, no matter what.
Welcome to Boardroom Revenge Stories. a channel focused on workplace conflict, corporate betrayal, power struggles, and quiet justice. Our stories follow a structured workflow to deliver a consistent, immersive experience. We start by analyzing real discussions on Reddit, Facebook, Quora, and blogs. Next, we craft original scripts using AI tools like ChatGPT. We then use 11 Labs to transform text into high-quality voice and edit everything in CapCut for a smooth, cinematic finish. Thumbnails are designed with Canva, and every video is carefully reviewed before release. These stories go beyond entertainment, revealing how power truly works and how justice quietly unfolds.